Welcome to Flight Jack 452. We will be taking you on a ride with two passengers who have traveled from Spain to Africa, two places filled with rich cultures and history. If you've ever felt rocky about traveling abroad, we're here to debunk all fears that may have you up in the air. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
Thank you, Flight Attendant Thompson. And hey, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Up in the Air, a Scripps Howard School of Journalism and Communications podcast. I'm your host and co-pilot, Lauryn Bass, but for today, you all can call me Lori B. I am a graduating senior, journalism major, psychology minor from the mini Hollywood of the South, Atlanta, Georgia. And today, I have the honor of being joined by my fellow Hamptonians who will share with us what it felt like to leave our home by the sea and be a part of different cultures, environments, and countries all across the globe. So, welcome, Alexis. It's really great to have you here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Alexis Walker. I am a graduating senior international studies major, leadership studies minor from Dallas.
Okay, and so you know the topic of today is going to be international travel. So where have you been before?
So I've been to 7 different countries, 8 if you count a layover I had in the Amsterdam airport, but I've been to England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, France, Italy, and Spain.
Wow, you've been a lot of different places, and which one would you say is like your favorite?
That's a hard question. I think it'd be a tie between probably France and Spain.
Okay, and we've checked you out. We saw that you've gone to Spain, and so that's really the one that we're really interested in for today. So when you traveled to Spain, how did you enjoy your trip?
I loved it. So I was doing a study abroad program there, and I was specifically in Granada, Spain, which is in southern Spain, the province of Andalusia. And I stayed with the host family, went to school, Monday through Friday. We had a lot of excursions and lots of free time, too, to just explore what our new home would be for the semester. And I was also joined by a lot of other students from universities around the country, as well as some European students and really just students from around the world who were doing their, year or semester abroad. So it was a really good time. I loved it.
Yeah, that is so cool. And you had a host family. What was that like?
Yes, I did. It was honestly probably the best decision I could have made because our options were host family, get an apartment, or do like the dorm style living. I wanted the host family because, they cook for you. I wanted to immerse myself as much as possible, but it did come with some challenges. My host family did not speak any English.
Oh, wow.
So I had to go off of the Spanish I knew, which was, I guess, very little, as well as rely on my roommate for a period of time until I got comfortable. But within a week, my host mom was like, you're improving, you're doing better. And it got easier. And then, it was just custom day to day to just tell my, host mom about my day. I also had 2 host sisters and a host dad. So it was a very full house.
Family. Yeah, that's so cool. And so you already knew a little Spanish.
A little bit. I had been taking Spanish since 8th grade, so in middle school. But I always struggled, even, with Spanish 301, which I actually took here at Hampton. The semester before I went abroad, I had moments where I was struggling to just grasp certain concepts. So, going and actually being fully immersed, I would say was the best way for me to start picking it up faster.
And you went through a program. Did that mean that you had to come out of pocket, or what were the prices like for this trip?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. So, I decided maybe a fourth of the way through, first semester of sophomore year, that I actually wanted to do it and kind of was behind schedule in regard to when you should be applying and scholarships and whatnot. So I went through a study abroad agency called CEA, which stands for Cultural Experiences Abroad, but they're among the likes of AIFS, CIEE. Those were all programs that you can learn about at Hampton's international office. So in terms of paying for it, I tried to weigh my options. Of course, the most ideal would be to find a program that would pay for it in full, but I was late for a lot of deadlines. Okay. So I found a bunch, put in for a bunch, ended up only getting one, which was for a small amount. Nonetheless, it did help. But as for the rest, it was out of pocket, which, I have my parents to thank. and, for that, because that was definitely a huge privilege. But there are lots of scholarships and ways for students to get it paid for in full, and a lot of times it can end up being like less expensive than what you pay for like a semester of, school at your university.
Yeah, that is so cool. I'm kind of living vicariously through you. Like, I love hearing all the things that you're doing, because that's something that I know this podcast purpose is to debunk fears of travel, or just learning how that could be accessible to us. So then I heard how you financially prepared. How did you mentally prepare for this trip? You were with a different family, amongst a different culture. You were gone for a period of time, and speaking with you previously, this is during COVID, like at the start of it. So how did you prepare mentally for this big shift?
So it's funny you mentioned COVID, because I remember like early January, maybe like mid-January, first kind of hearing about this coronavirus. And I was wondering kind of would that not have an impact on my experience? But I didn't really think about it. In terms of mentally preparing, I watched a lot of vlogs. It was kind of hard to find vlogs on specifically my location, because most students that go to Spain are in Barcelona or they're in Madrid, whereas other cities like Sevilla, Granada, they're popular locations but not as common. So I just watched a lot of vlogs from tourists that have been to the city. I actually followed this student who studied in, I think she was in Prague, which, completely opposite of Spain. But it was just still interesting to see kind of what her day-to-day looked like, how she budgeted, what that was like, walking to class and being in a new culture. And then I also challenged myself to kind of have no expectations, which I'm glad I did in hindsight, because it was a huge culture shock.
Really? Talk a little bit more about this culture shock. Were there any moments where you were fearful, or there were like any kind of negative aspects to your trip at all?
Yeah, I think the minute so I had to take 3 flights to get there. When we finally got there, my dad actually went with me just to, get me moved in and settled.
Okay.
And when we were at the airport trying to get a taxi to our hotel, a gentleman came in and he was just started speaking Spanish, and I had no idea what he was saying. And eventually, we worked it out with the help of Spanish dictionary and Google Translate. And I got, to the hotel. But in the moment of just driving to the hotel and seeing kind of the city as we were driving, I was kind of like, oh my God, what have I done? I really hope I like this. And actually, because I'm going to be here until, this was end of January, and I was supposed to be there till the end of May.
Okay.
So in terms of other negative aspects, I think struggling with confidence and, of course, being an American, but also being a woman and being a Black woman at that. So, you are a minority while you're, in a lot of European countries. But in terms of negative experiences, I really didn't have any. I really tried to challenge myself to be open-minded and look at myself as okay, I'm a visitor and or a foreigner of sorts in this country. So it's my job to kind of learn the culture, try and come with a mindset of understanding so that I can, take in as much as I can.
Yeah, I really love that too. It just is full of positive energy, because I know a lot of concerns that we've seen amongst a lot of, especially Black women, but even just the Black youth in general. There are concerns of racism or trafficking, or even just violence in the area. Did you see anything bad happen on your trip, or it just was pretty seamless?
In terms of violent or bad things, no. But in terms of experiencing just racism and or being made to feel or, people reminding you that you are different, I did have a couple of those experiences. I think, Spain, as a lot of other European countries, do kind of have a reputation for being racist, which when I first visited Spain when I was 12, my family and I did have an experience in which we were treated kind of poorly at a restaurant, and we ended up not even eating there. But when I was actually studying abroad, so now as college student, 19, I was out shopping. So I'll start with this. One thing a lot of people do there is they stare, and it's something that I learned was just common and just part of their culture. Okay. So it's not so much oh, they're looking at me. It's they look at everybody. Okay. So that was something that was uncomfortable at first for me, and our program director was explaining that to us. She was like, have y'all noticed people stare? That's kind of how we do things here. Don't take it personally. So I don't know, if people would stare at me, I would just stare back, try to, embrace it or whatever. But in terms of experience that I 100% just kind of felt isolated, I was at a Zara actually, because there's Zaras everywhere there. And I was shopping around and I noticed a couple of people looking at me, especially while I was waiting to go into the dressing room. And while I was in the dressing room, this was maybe like in the grand scheme of like my time there, maybe like halfway through. And I'd overheard in the other room this woman, I think her daughter, talking about like the chica negra, which is like black girl. So I don't really know exactly what they were saying, but that was kind of like an odd and kind of isolating experience because obviously there was laughter, giggles, and I was the only black girl there. So I knew they were talking about me. So it was kind of just like not even like a back to reality moment, but kind of like a, dang, this kind of sucks. But that's, the reality a lot of times for black people traveling abroad. But other than that, like no other instances of violence. Overall, it was a really positive experience being there. Like my host family treated me well. I never had any issues with like professors or teachers or even really with locals. A lot of them were pretty open. And I will say in southern Spain, you do see a lot more black people and or Africans just with its proximity to, Gibraltar, Africa. Right. So there's, as I like learned in my classes, there's been like an influx too of immigrants and refugees as well from Africa. So it was more common to see like black people in southern parts of Spain, like Granada, Sevilla, Malaga, than like you might in Barcelona or Madrid. So it's also nice to see a lot more of our people and or, I feel like there's a lot more of a mix of cultures there as well. Like I would meet a lot of locals who like maybe were Spanish and Moroccan or French and Moroccan and had like that different types of ancestry, different languages as well.
Okay. And so then I guess what was like your favorite moment while you were there?
That's hard. That's a really hard question.
There were so many different moments, huh?
I really can't pick. I really can't. I think the coolest experience, well, I enjoyed all of our excursions, but I would say, so we went to Sevilla and we went to the Real Alcazar, which is like a palace. And I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and some of the scenes were shot there. So like the Water Gardens of Dorne was actually shot there. So it was cool to see that. Sevilla is also really beautiful. I think that's also where I got the best pictures too. So I guess I'd say that was like my favorite.
That's so cool, especially because you got to see where they filmed. That's so amazing. And I really love hearing about just a great experience traveling abroad because that's the whole point of all these questions we have up in the air. We want to make sure that we do feel safe as well. So what advice could you give to different students who are considering studying abroad or even just visiting Spain?
Yeah, I would say if you want to do it and are open to it, that's the best mindset to have. It can be super scary, I think, because I started out traveling internationally at a young age. Like I developed the travel bug, so I was always like super pressed to like, where am I going to go next? But my very first time out of the country, I was 10. I was not with my parents, and I was crying like every night. So it's very terrifying, especially when you're like conceptualizing the fact that you're so far away. But I would say for students that are interested, like it's 100% possible and doable. Like there are programs and there's so much money out there to where you can actually go and have it paid for in full. I think some students have questions regarding their major and how that would transfer over. But, from my experience doing it just at Hampton, it was really positive. The international office was a great resource, and there's just so many grants and funding, whether it's like Gilman, Boren, there's a lot. So I would say keep an open mind, and I think, it's a privilege to travel. So, if you have the opportunity to do it, don't take it lightly, but also encourage, more people to do it.
Okay. Well, how can students get connected with you if they have any other questions?
They can find me on Instagram. They can also email me. It's, alexis.walker and then at my .hampton.edu, the usual Hampton email, or the international office. I'm an open book. Phone number if they want, because I would love to talk to anyone about it that's interested.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Up in the Air, Miss Walker. It was really nice to talk to you today, and I hope that you will tune in to Up in the Air in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now that we have reached cruising altitude, we should be touching down in our next location soon. I have an alert from our captain, Dean Wilson, that we will have a layover in Africa, where you'll learn more about the Black travel experience and how the culture has shifted.
When it comes to traveling as an African American, we're always talking to our friends about where we want to go, trips we want to plan, and the best times to visit. However, when it comes to studying abroad, we don't hear much from our peers about studying outside of the U.S. According to NAFSA, out of students that studied abroad from 2014 through 15, only 5.6 were African American, and from 2016 through 17, it's only increased by 0.5%. After a discussion with some classmates on the topic, some things that kept coming up in conversation were the lack of funds and, of course, racism. Even places like Africa, where the majority of the population is Black, there is a fear that African Americans are disliked. Outside of those two, it seemed like there was little to nothing stopping African Americans from traveling out of the country. As a young student myself, there's only so much I can experience and understand. So to help, our flight attendant will speak with a passenger who has been in our same seats when he was a student and traveling for the first time. Please welcome Dr. Robert Watson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberlee-Mykel Thompson, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Professor Watson, one of the esteemed professors here at Hampton University. How are you doing today, Professor Watson?
I am doing well, and thanks for having me. I'm very appreciative to have this opportunity to talk with you all.
Yes, and we are so appreciative to have you here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into the question?
Okay, well, I'm a native of Hazelhurst, Mississippi, where I grew up during the 1960s, very turbulent but exciting times in this country. I went to Tougaloo College, where I majored in chemistry. I've been both a chemist and a historian and a museum director. Here at Hampton, my primary responsibilities have been to teach, and so I love teaching African American history, also world civilization and geography, world geography. So I'm blessed.
That is awesome. That sounds like such an exciting career. So one thing we've heard is that you have personally been to Africa. So can you just tell us a little bit about that and what countries you visited while there?
Thank you for that question. I love talking about having gone to Africa, and I'm planning on going again in the very near future. But I've been I've been blessed to travel to Ghana in West Africa. I went to the Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Togo. First time I went. As a matter of fact, when I went, I was a rising senior at Tougaloo College, and I went there as part of a program called the Experiment in International Living Program. And this is a great program, and I recommend that our students, that young people, find out more about this program, because there are not a lot of people of color who know about it. But I was fortunate to go and work in a village in Ghana almost 2 months in 1968. And, you know, what's interesting is that my travels, particularly to Africa in those days, changed my mind about what I wanted to do, because I was bent on becoming a chemist and making a lot of money. And I realized that I really was not going to be happy. I was happy for a while because I made money, but really that trip to Ghana changed my thinking about a lot of things, about materialism, about what makes you happy and what makes you passionate about what it is you want to do. And over the years, I realized that and I recommend this to students as well, do what you're passionate about. If you take a job or you major in something just because someone said you can make a lot of money, I think that's the wrong advice. I think you should go and study and be passionate about it. And that's what the trip to Ghana did for me. Fortunately, as I said, as you said, I've been to Ghana, I've been to Africa several times. Most recently, it's been too long ago, but I went to Ghana and Senegal again. But in between, I spent time. In fact, I took some students, university students, not from Hampton, but from all over the country, to Kenya and Tanzania and East Africa. And even there, it felt like it was the kind of experience that I would love for anyone to have, because it does add an element to your life that you otherwise might not have if you don't venture out. I was fortunate, too, not just to go to Africa, but to go to Europe. As part of the first program, I spent time in Switzerland and France and Belgium, which was a good thing for me. you know. I've taken students to the Caribbean and to Mexico and other places. So traveling has been a part of my great experiences.
Awesome, awesome. That all sounds so amazing. I would hope that I would one day be able to travel as much as well. So another question we wanted to ask you is, in the U.S. and many other countries, Africa is oftentimes portrayed as poverty-stricken. Based on your observations and your personal experiences, how would you describe the African countries that you've been to?
African countries that I've gone to, I saw poverty. There's no doubt about that. But I also saw poverty in the Mississippi Delta growing up. I saw poverty in Tennessee and Kentucky. So poverty is not something that people generally recognize who live under those kinds of social and economic conditions. Poverty is something that's real. It's definitely real when you live in places where you don't have running water. In the case of some of the countries I went to in Africa, there was not always indoor plumbing. But that aside, people live their lives. They live their lives to the degree that they didn't appear to be worried about a whole lot of things. And so I think, things like poverty-stricken and, being poor were things that are real. But at the same time, it's real all over the world, not just in Africa. And that's one of the misperceptions that I think is important that we acknowledge, that it's not only in Africa, it's right here in our own country as well.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree on that topic. A lot of people, like you said, we see Africa portrayed as this poor country, but there is poverty everywhere in the world, and it's not just Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing I was interested in discussing, a big part of the theme of this podcast is studying abroad. You've taken students across the world. We also have some students here who studied abroad, and really talking about what those experiences are like. So from your personal experiences, would you recommend studying abroad?
Oh, absolutely. I think every student really should have the opportunity, and I think our departments ought to have programs or have connections that will allow our students to experience living and studying abroad. And not just in Africa. There's the Caribbean that is not that far away. There are places in Canada, for example, that I think we should focus on. So, yeah, I really strongly support a program that will allow students to travel abroad. Kimberlee, one of the things I noticed right here on our campus is that we have all of those flags in front of Ogden Hall. Mm-hmm. And wouldn't it be nice if we had programs where people could have study abroad programs, study abroad experiences at each one of those countries? I think we have the flags. Let's use the resources. We have the connection. We obviously have the name. And I think our president has a vision that we be global in our thinking. And I think whoever comes in after Dr. Harvey, my hope is that they will have that kind of vision where they will encourage our students to think broadly and act globally.
No, I definitely agree. President Harvey, I've had the pleasure of working with him myself as the student president this year. Good. And he definitely has a global mindset, so I hope that continues to expand for the university and student opportunities. The next thing I wanted to ask you was, we are at an HBCU where we have African-American students, and one thing that is kind of taboo to a lot of the African-American community is global travel. Sometimes you're cautioned against it, be careful. So why do you think that might be?
I think historically we have not taken advantage of the opportunities as HBCUs. Now, part of that is lack of education, that is not knowing. And I think another part of it is what you just said. I think there is this fear that if you travel, you're unsafe. But you're unsafe in this country as well. I mean, it's not just in foreign countries. As a matter of fact, people of color, particularly black folks, in Africa, black folks come from this country going to Africa, it's like going home in many instances. So I think the HBCUs, as part of their mission, it should be to expand the thinking about global travel and global experiences. And we must also keep in mind that there are students from African countries and other countries come to Hampton. And so I'm sure that some of them come with perceptions. What is it going to be like to attend an HBCU? What is it going to be like? Am I going to be able to get along with with people who are different than I am. And I think the judgment is good, and that we, in fact, have made friends. And people who come here have made friends, friendships that last forever. I know one of the things I tell my students about this kind of experience is that at an HBCU, it's still diverse, because when we talk about diversity, we're not just talking about people from the same place. You know, you're from North Carolina, I'm from Mississippi, someone else is from New Jersey, someone else is from Tennessee. That's a type of diversity. However, I encourage a kind of global diversity, because you never know in your classroom who you might be sitting next to if they're from another country. They may be the next president of their country. They may be the next ambassador of their country. They may be this, they may be that. And so the more friends and more experiences we have in our own country with people who are coming from other places, particularly at the HBCUs, I think is a very good thing.
No, definitely. I agree. I agree with everything you said. I also wanted to touch on one thing you mentioned earlier. You visited Europe and Africa. Mm-hmm. So I was just interested in learning the different experiences you had and if those were negative or positive. Mm-hmm. You know, Africa, everybody's black, but in Europe, they're definitely not. So.
Right. Well, when I was in Europe, I was not there very long, but I did not experience any direct discrimination or anything that made me feel uncomfortable being the only chocolate chip in the room sort of thing. So I didn't feel uncomfortable that way. And when I went to Africa, I just fitted right in. You know, it was particularly when I went to Ghana, and also in Kenya. I remember, and I'll share this with you quickly. I was the group leader for 13 students who I took to Kenya through an organization called Operation Crossroads Africa. And we were in this village, a little village called Kendube, which is right near Lake Victoria. Every day we would work up until, when I say work, we were actually there to help construct a primary school building for the local villagers. And every day about 3 o'clock, we would stop working, and then we would play volleyball against one of the local high schools. And when I was playing, I would always play with my students, the ones I took. And the Kenyans on the sideline, they started a chant. And the chant was, "You are not an American," talking about me. They identified me as one of them, as opposed to me being an American. And that was such a comforting feeling to be welcomed home that way. The same thing happened in other places I've been. You know, be positive. They were always had the welcome mat out for me. And I could see it. And my group members could see it. My group, by the way, was comprised of 13 students. There were only 3 black students. One was from Boston. And there was a young lady from Washington, D.C., and myself, being from Mississippi. Everybody else in the group was white. And the white students and even the other black students could sense that the villagers were going out of their way to make me feel happy and comfortable. And it was a beautiful feeling. It really was like going home, being welcomed by relatives.
Well, awesome. Mm-hmm. I'm so excited for you. And thank you so much for coming and just sharing your stories and insights. We really, really appreciate it.
Good. May I just say one last thing? That is that I think this is such a good opportunity. And I think HBCUs should lead the way. I think we can find the money for everything else. We can find the money to expand the Year Abroad program for our students. We are global, not just local.
Exactly. Okay. Again, thank you so much, Professor Watson.
You're
I
welcome.
Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Good luck.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Up in the Air. On behalf of the Jack 452 class, we thank you all for listening and encourage those who may be considering studying abroad or traveling in general to do more research. And we hope that this conversation sheds a little light on our guests. I'm Lori B, and we hope to see you on our next flight.